So, picture Africa Day, 2026.
Yeah.
It's a day that is explicitly, literally designed for continental unity. You know, you'd expect the usual parades, speeches, a real sense of shared pride. But instead, look at the actual reality on the ground in South Africa right now.
It's completely the opposite.
Exactly. 7 people are dead. You've got embassies frantically evacuating their citizens.
Hmm.
Ghana and Nigeria are actively repatriating their people. And on the actual holiday itself, African ambassadors staged this massive public boycott of South Africa's official celebrations because, well, they simply didn't feel safe.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of a diplomatic and humanitarian crisis. You have a nation that, proudly positions itself as the gateway to the continent, and it's currently being watched with deep alarm by its own neighbors.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. Our mission right now is to figure out how one of Africa's most admired democracies reached this incredibly volatile point.
Right. It didn't just happen overnight.
No, not at all. And to understand it, we're going through a pretty dense stack of sources today. We've got a comprehensive new report from SAASD, that's the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Sustainable Development, along with some really eye-opening data from Human Rights Watch, Xenowatch, and various on-the-ground reporting.
Which is crucial because we need to look at the intersection of, real economic pain, xenophobia, and these sort of tripped algorithms in our pockets that are just accelerating all of this chaos.
Yeah, the digital aspect is huge. But really quickly, before we get into it, I need to state a critical rule for us today. The sources we're discussing cover some highly charged political topics and specific movements, like March and March or Operation Doula.
Right. Very polarizing groups.
Exactly. So we want to make it abundantly clear to you, the listener, that neither of us here is endorsing any political viewpoints, movements, or taking any sides.
Absolutely not.
We're strictly acting as impartial guides. We're just reporting the factual content, the data, and the arguments from our source material so you can understand the mechanics of this broader picture.
Yeah, we're looking at the mechanics of the crisis, not picking a side in it. And to understand those mechanics, I think we really have to start with the physical reality on the ground.
The tinderbox, basically.
Exactly, the tinderbox. Because before we can talk about how technology is fanning the flames, we have to acknowledge the very real, very severe economic pain that South Africans are feeling right now. The economy is in a state of profound distress.
It really is. I mean, the numbers are staggering.
They are. The official unemployment rate hit 32.7% in the first quarter of 2026.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you translate that to people, that is over 8.1 million people without work.
8.1 million. And the youth unemployment is even worse, right? It's at a devastating 57%. Plus, when you look at the Human Rights Watch data, they point out that broader unemployment, which, includes people who have just completely given up looking for a job, that number pushes past 43%.
Right, which creates this environment of just intense survival-level anxiety every single day.
Yeah, waking up without an economic purpose or a way to feed your family. But here's where we hit this massive paradox in the data. All of this immense economic frustration is being largely directed at immigrants, right?
Yes.
But according to South Africa's own 2022 census, migrants make up just 3.9% of the population.
Right, so we're talking about roughly 2.4 million people out of a total population of 62 million.
So, okay, I want to use an analogy here because think about the economy like a shrinking pie.
Yeah.
If you're starving and you just cannot get a slice no matter what you do, you naturally hyperfixate on anyone else who seems to be eating.
That's human nature, yeah.
But how does a group that makes up less than 4% of the country become the primary target for all of this national anger?
Well, sociologists point to this mechanism, and it's called the friction of visibility. Because human beings, we don't experience the macroeconomy through, national census spreadsheets.
Right, we don't walk around reading data tables.
Exactly. You experience it on your street corner, in your local market, in your immediate daily life. And the lived reality in a lot of South African townships presents these really stark, visible contrasts. For example, Statistics South Africa found that the employment absorption rate for foreign nationals is 64%.
Compared to what for locals?
Just 37.7% for South African-born workers.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive gap. And the sources outline a few reasons for that, right? Like, foreign nationals arriving in a new country are often driven by just sheer desperation, so they'll accept lower wages, bypass formal labor protections, and just take absolutely any job available.
Yeah, they have to survive. And furthermore, in some townships, foreign nationals own up to 40% of the informal businesses, the
Mm.
spaza shops that you see on the corner.
Right.
So that visibility is the friction. If you've been waiting for the economic dividends of the post-apartheid Rainbow Nation for 3 decades, and you still can't find work,
Yeah.
walking past a thriving, foreign-owned spaza shop every single day feels deeply, deeply unfair.
Yeah, that daily visual reminder basically creates a psychological reality that completely overshadows the statistical reality of that tiny 3.9%.
Exactly. And we see this reflected in the data. The Inclusive Society Institute's GovDem survey captured this shift in perception perfectly.
Yeah.
They tracked a surge in the distrust of immigrants, going from 62.6% in 2021 up to 73.1% in 2025.
That's a huge jump in just 4 years.
It is. And a staggering 77% of respondents agreed with the statement that immigrants increase crime.
Wait, but our sources emphasize that narrative is completely unsupported by actual evidence, right?
Completely unsupported. The data does not show immigrants driving up crime rates.
Mm-hmm.
But a leap in distrust of over 10% in 4 years, that is not a gradual, organic shift in public opinion.
No, it's artificially accelerated.
Violently accelerated, yes. Which brings us perfectly to the digital match that's being thrown into this economic tinderbox.
The algorithms.
Exactly. This massive leap in distrust isn't just organic word of mouth. These narratives are being engineered and supercharged by the digital world, by platforms most South Africans use every day: Facebook, TikTok, X, WhatsApp.
Because the SAIZ report highlights this fundamental truth. These platforms are not neutral public squares. They are optimization engines.
Right, they have one metric.
Engagement. They just want engagement. And decades of internal tech industry research basically confirm that the emotion most likely to compel a human being to click, to share, to stay on an app is anger.
Anger and fear. So a blurry, out-of-context video of a foreign national allegedly committing a crime is going to travel significantly faster than a nuanced, fact-checked article about the economic contributions of immigrants.
The algorithm basically rewards the outrage with what the report calls algorithmic velocity.
Yes, algorithmic velocity is the crucial mechanism here. When a piece of content gets a massive spike in engagement within, say, the first few minutes of being posted, the platform's recommendation engine stops treating it as a normal post.
It's like it flags it as a superstar post.
Exactly. It bypasses the normal chronological feed and just blasts out to the trending or For You pages of millions of users who weren't even looking for it.
I think of it sort of like an autofocus feature on a camera, but one that is hard-coded to only lock onto a car crash.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like, if 99% of the scene is just a peaceful street, but there's a fender bender way in the background, the lens just violently zooms in on the crash, blurring out everything else until the crash is literally all you can see.
That is a perfect visualization. And the most disturbing part of the CVSD report is the revelation that this zoom-in effect is being intentionally triggered.
By the dark labs.
Right, by what they call dark labs. So we aren't just talking about passive algorithms naturally surfacing angry posts because people like them. We are looking at coordinated narrative architecture.
Yeah, these dark labs operate like highly organized, well-resourced mini factories, and some are even based entirely outside of South Africa, right?
Completely external.
And their sole purpose is to produce inflammatory, divisive content. They know exactly how to trick that autofocus camera. They use these vast networks of fake accounts to share an inflammatory message in a highly concentrated time window.
To manufacture that initial spike.
Exactly. They manufacture the algorithmic velocity, tricking the platform into pushing the content natively. It's like someone pouring gasoline on a small brush fire and then using giant digital fans to blow the flames into all the neighboring towns.
And they don't just stay online either. They utilize traditional media to legitimize the digital outrage.
Oh, right, the radio shows.
Yeah. Operatives from these dark labs will coordinate to flood the phone lines of popular live radio talk shows. So they'll call in and offer these really aggressive anti-immigrant opinions back to back to back.
So if you're just a normal person driving to work, listening to the radio, you're hearing this, and it creates a completely false sense of overwhelming public consensus.
Exactly. You think, wow, the entire country feels this way, completely unaware that you were listening to a manufactured, coordinated operation.
And here is where the data gets really chilling. The XenoWatch monitoring project reveals this disturbing pattern in the timing of these operations, because the xenophobic rhetoric doesn't just spike randomly.
No, it is highly cyclical.
It surges predictably right around local elections. Xenophobic discourse and violence spiked ahead of local elections in 2016, 2019, and 2020. And the recent XenoWatch data shows incidents peaking at 110 in 2022, then it dips down to 62 in 2023, and then rises sharply again to 83 in 2024 as the country approaches these upcoming November 2026 to January 2027 local elections.
Right, so the algorithm doesn't invent the xenophobia. Like we said, the prejudice and the crushing economic pain, they already exist in that tinderbox.
Yeah.
But the algorithm scales it, it normalizes it, and it allows populist political factions to time it perfectly for electoral gain.
It transforms a local neighborhood grievance into a national, digitally optimized campaign.
Exactly. And when that digitally manufactured outrage finally spills out of the phone and materializes as physical movements, groups like Operation Duzela organizing actual protests in the streets, it forces the government's hand.
And this is where the line between governance and mob rule really starts to blur in our sources.
Right. Because the South African government estimates there are roughly 4 million undocumented foreign nationals currently in the country. And in response to these escalating street protests, officials proposed some pretty significant policy shifts.
Like deploying 10,000 additional labor inspectors, strictly enforcing the Immigration Act, and prosecuting or imprisoning employers who exploit undocumented workers.
Right.
But let me push back on this for a second, or at least challenge the narrative here. Because based on the reports, human rights groups are deeply critical of these moves. But from just a purely administrative standpoint, isn't this just basic governance?
All right, it sounds like it.
I mean, enforcing existing immigration laws and fining employers who exploit undocumented labor, that seems like basic rule of law. Why does this cross the line into something being criticized as dangerous?
It's a great question. And the CISD report explicitly acknowledges that a sovereign government has every right, and frankly an obligation, to manage its borders and enforce its labor laws.
Right.
The danger doesn't lie in the laws themselves. It lies entirely in the tone and the timing of how these policies are enacted. When policy announcements track the mood of violent, angry protests rather than evidence-based needs, the government effectively validates the mob's tactics.
Okay. So if the government only enforces the law as a reaction to a protest, they are basically telling the public that marching in the street and threatening violence is the most effective way to change policy.
Precisely. They validate the method. And the crisis deepens when mainstream media and public officials amplify the false claims made by these groups without correcting them.
Like what kind of claims?
Well, for instance, the rampant misinformation that migrants are draining healthcare and education entitlements.
Oh, right.
Under South African law, and according to the actual fiscal data, that is largely false. But when mainstream outlets just repeat the claim without fact-checking it, or officials pander to it just to appease the crowd, they are granting institutional weight to a digital lie.
Wow.
So that's when basic governance morphs into crisis management through populism.
Okay, so if current policies are just reacting to algorithmic anger, and the result is that they're alienating South Africa's neighbors, which culminated in that Africa Day boycott we talked about, we really need to look at what the actual economic data says should be happening.
Exactly. We need to look at the evidence.
Right. Because the World Bank has conducted multiple really extensive studies on South African labor markets. And their findings basically strip away the emotion completely. They found that immigrants are net contributors to job creation, not net destroyers.
Yes. Foreign-owned small businesses actually create employment for South Africans. The informal sector, which, absorbs a massive portion of the local workforce who can't find jobs in the formal economy, that sector functions largely because of the supply chains and the customer networks that are sustained by foreign-owned enterprises.
And our sources strongly emphasize that South Africa's incredibly low economic growth, which has been hovering between like 0.6 and 1.3% annually, that's a structural issue.
It's deeply structural.
It's driven by massive energy infrastructure failures, specifically the ongoing grid collapse with Eskom. It's driven by severe skill shortages, a lack of investor confidence. I mean, the CASD report puts it brilliantly. They say, deporting 2.4 million people will not build a single power station.
It won't train one additional nurse. It won't repair the structural rot that's actually holding the economy back. So the real question becomes, How do you fix the root cause of this information manipulation?
And SAISD actually provides a 4-point solution for this. Right. Let's walk through it. Point 1. They argue it has to start with holding the platforms themselves accountable.
Because the current model of content moderation is fundamentally broken for the African continent. Silicon Valley PR teams love to boast about their safety measures, but their algorithms are primarily trained on English.
Yeah, they have these massive language blind spots. So ASD is saying algorithms need to be legally mandated and technically trained to catch hate speech and, coordinated inauthentic behavior in local languages like Zulu or Xhosa.
Exactly. Because if a platform cannot moderate the language of the country it operates in, it is actively facilitating the crisis.
Point 2 in their blueprint stresses digital literacy, framing it as a civic survival skill. But wait, point 3 is also really interesting. The need for strategic, human-centered counter-narratives.
Right, because policymakers and civil society usually rely on, dry PDFs from the World Bank to fight back against these highly emotional, algorithmically boosted videos of violence.
And a PDF doesn't go viral.
No, fact sheets do not go viral. Stories do. So there needs to be a massive investment in compelling storytelling that actually puts faces to the statistics, showing South Africans and immigrants building supply chains and businesses together.
Okay, but let me jump back to point 2 for a second, about the digital literacy. They want communities trained to understand how content reaches their phones, right? To question who benefits financially or politically from their outrage. I have to wonder, though, is teaching digital literacy just too slow of a fix? I mean, we're talking about WhatsApp groups that are buzzing today with imminent violent plans. Can a digital literacy workshop really stop a mob that is forming right now?
Well, you're right to push back on that because it is undeniably a long-term play. It's not going to stop a riot tomorrow.
Right.
But treating the root cause of information manipulation is the only way to stop the tinderbox from constantly refilling itself. If authorities only ever fight the physical fires in the streets and they never teach the public how to spot the digital arsonist, the country is just going to be fighting fires forever.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, digital literacy is about immunizing the population against those dark labs over time.
It's the vaccine, not the emergency room.
Exactly. And finally, point 4. The CAISD report argues that the African Union frameworks on free movement and peaceful cohabitation need actual teeth.
Not just text.
Right. The AU can't just issue polite press releases condemning violence. There have to be diplomatic and economic consequences to enforce continental solidarity. The evacuations and the boycotts we're seeing in 2026 are basically a preview of what happens when the continent allows one country's internal crisis to just fester in silence.
Yeah, so summarizing the core takeaway for you listening, South Africa is trapped in a devastating feedback loop right now. You have very real, crushing economic pain meeting highly sophisticated digital manipulation.
And the result is a profound cost. It's measured in human lives, destroyed businesses, and the severe destabilization of the entire region's diplomatic standing.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final kind of lingering question to mull over on your own. It's drawn from the sources, but we haven't explicitly mentioned it yet.
Right, the broader economic treaties.
Exactly. Consider the African Continental Free Trade Area, the FCFTA, and South Africa's highly prized soft power. South Africa relies really heavily on positioning itself as the gateway to the African continent for its own economic survival.
It's their main pitch to the global market.
Right. So if a nation allows this digitally fueled xenophobia to fester, alienating its closest trading partners and neighbors, what happens when that gateway eventually finds its gates permanently locked from the outside?
Definitely something to think about.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and please always think critically about the content you consume and share.